This regime in Tehran is a regime of death. It's a death cult regime. And thank God the Israelis stepped in and did what Metz described as our dirty work for us, because none of the others were going to. And Dani is clearly a radical, clearly has Islamist tendencies, has refused to condemn calls for intifada in America, by the way. I mean, it's astonishing. Can you imagine? I mean, somebody who believes that intifada is a desirable thing, this is horrific, horrifying.
And
it's astonishing watching it, because this is what we've seen in Britain and in Europe for many years, which is the emergence of radical figures who clearly hate our way of life in the West, many of whom have arrived, like Mandani, very recently. And they pretend that they've dropped their sectarian politics, but they haven't. And they pretend to have dropped their Islamist attitudes, but very often they haven't. To my mind, all of these countries, Britain, Europe, America, Canada, they're experiencing a little bit of what Israel cannot turn away from, cannot ignore. And the question is then, do we in the rest of the West accept this challenge, face up to it and face it down? Or do we just allow ourselves to be constantly rolled over by extremely hostile actors? That's a question for all of us. And I'm, in a way, like a lot of Israelis, I'm uncomfortable, to put it at its mildest, the way in which Israel has been thrown to the forefront by these radicals who have no say in the matter. I mean, for instance, the mayor of New York isn't meant to have a foreign policy. I mean, he or she is meant to make sure that for once the garbage bags are collected and there aren't rats on the streets, and that you can get on the subway without being set on fire or shot or stabbed. These are all good things to do. But like his would-be counterparts elsewhere, Israel and obsession with Israel and Israeli foreign policy and Israeli defense policy becomes the number one issue for them. And that is really alarming. And it should be and will be, I know, very alarming to a lot of Israelis, because this is too much attention, and negative, deliberately hostile attention. Why should a foreign war be litigated in a domestic local politics? Except that, as with counterparts in the UK like that, they cannot get off their obsession with Israel. And I explain at a couple of points in the book why that is. And again, I don't think most people in the West, and I think a lot of Israelis don't understand don't understand the depth of the hatred and the bigotry and where it actually comes from. And unless we zap at some point ideologically the roots of the cancer of this, it'll just spread. So I'm for identifying and zapping the roots of the ideological cancer. The German Chancellor Merz, actually, he said something very, very important and true, and I admire him for it, and we shouldn't ridicule him for it. He said, the Israelis are, quote, doing our dirty work for us. And that was extremely important, because look at the countries in the world who have said the Iranian regime cannot have, the most dangerous regime in the world cannot have the world's most dangerous weapons. Look at the countries that said that. All the countries in the West, it wasn't just Israel, all the countries, Europe and everyone else, they all said, oh, we know that the Ayatollahs can't have nuclear bombs. But it ended up, as I've always said it would, it ended up with being Israel that took action because nobody else would. But the fact that the German Chancellor was willing to say, yes, this regime in Tehran is a regime of death. It's a death cult regime. And thank God the Israelis stepped in and did what Metz described as our dirty work for us, because none of the others were going to.
Is this at root a religious conflict, which may not be solvable in that case, in your opinion?
I think there is certainly an aspect to it which is obviously religious. Yes. I mean, Iran and its terrorist proxies cite religious sources and religious justification for their bigotries. So obviously there's a religious element to it. There's two things I would say quickly. One is again, I think most people don't realize this in the West, but the deep theological roots of much of this, one of which is that the Jews were among the first to refuse the invitation of Muhammad to accept his prophecies and accept his revelation. And the Jews said, no, we've got our own book. effectively. And for many people in the Muslim world, that is the ultimate sin, to have rejected the Prophet Muhammad as they think of him from the beginning. And many people seem not to realize that this is one of the reasons why, people say, why the Jews? There are different types of anti-Semitism, but Islamic anti-Semitism has its roots in the origins of Islam and the story of the origins of Islam. So that's very, very deep. And another, by the way, is, as I mentioned, the book, the way in which after 1945, virulent Nazi-style anti-Semitism was chased out of not just civilized society, but society everywhere in the world, except for in the Arab and Muslim world. And there's a reason for that. There were strains of Christian thought, which not just for centuries, but millennia, held the Jews responsible for the death of Christ. But that is not in any way, not a mainstream view, but not a fringe view. And since the Vatican's pronouncements post-war about this finally clearing up this theological issue, you don't find people in pulpits in the West, or indeed anywhere, calling for the death of Jews from Christian pulpits, or blaming the Jews for the death of Jesus. So even very, very deep theological issues can be addressed. They can be. But you have to face up to them. You have to face up to it, as we have to face up to the horrible existence of Nazi-style anti-Semitism thriving still in elements of the Muslim world.
And many of them within the West. There was a report by memory, the Middle Eastern Media Research Institute, which nobody wanted to touch, about imams in North America preaching violent anti-Semitism. And no one wants to touch that because of Islamophobia. I love to read Andy McCarthy about these things, and he was a prosecutor once, and he said, there's no such thing as Islamophobia. That's a term invented by the Muslim Brotherhood in order to discourage inquiry into Sharia supremacy. I will generalize from Roman Spector's interesting question about the prospect of a grassroots movement from the likes of Tommy Robinson in Britain, and maybe in other places too, where the sovereigntist right, when it doesn't seep into the other side of anti-Semitism, is on the rise. Is that reason for hope, for optimism about the future in Europe and the United States?
It's very difficult because there are these sets of moves that are being used to shut down such a movement. You just mentioned one earlier, Gadi, the move of Islamophobia, for instance. Watch as Mandani in New York in the coming days and weeks tries to counter his virulent anti-Semitism by accusing his critics of Islamophobia. Just watch as it happens.
Yeah.
He'll turn himself into the victim, you bet.
Like clockwork.
Like clockwork, and it'll work on a lot of people. And it's the same thing in other countries. But one of the other things which I've written about for many years now, I've written about Tommy Robinson occasionally for about 20 years since he first emerged. There is a pattern in the West, which is that if there's a problem, like the problem of jihadism, the problem of extremism, Islamism, worship and support of the death cults, if there's a problem like that, the tendency is for the authorities to clamp down not on the problem, but on the people identifying the problem. This is particularly the British move about this. The British state has come down on Tommy Robinson far harder than it's come down on any Islamist who has done anything.
Or on grooming gangs, basically.
If the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, the Muslim rape gangs in the North of England and elsewhere, across England indeed, had been focused on by the authorities as much as they focused on Tommy Robinson, the problem could have been solved. And you wouldn't have something for people like him to complain about. I mean, because the authorities would have taken care of it. No, there's this very, very unpleasant, ugly, and cynical and stupid policy of cracking down on people who respond and not on the problem. Same last year, 3 young girls stabbed to death in Southport at a Taylor Swift dance party, and the authorities cracked down on people online expressing their rage, some of which was undoubtedly wrong, but crack down on people expressing grievance about this more than they do on anyone who advocates such things and glorifies such things. It's insane to watch it. It's been very interesting to watch a form of left-wing anti-Semitism, which is a form of projection, using the Jews as a psychological projection mechanism, now being replicated on the right. But to me, the interesting thing is this: the growth of the anti-Israel and indeed, yes, anti-Semitic right, mainly in America, it has to be said, on a little fringe portion of the MAGA movement, which is absolutely resisted by President Trump and all of the serious and senior people, but nevertheless is brewing. I tell you what it really is. It's not the Jews and Israel, again, end up having to bear an unnatural focus and accept an unnatural weight. But it's really about the West and America. For in recent decades, there has been an anti-American left that has dominated the left in America, an anti-Western left. And it's not just about colonialism, talking endlessly about slavery and other things that were addressed centuries ago and pretending they haven't been addressed. It's also about believing that America can do no good in the world. This is what Noam Chomsky and others pushed from the 60s onwards, was effectively America was just a negative force in the world. And if America intervened in a conflict, it caused the conflict. And if it didn't intervene in a conflict, it caused the conflict. Well, now we see that on the anti-American right. These new people, or newly believe, that America can do no good in the world, and indeed the West can do no good in the world. And look at these people in recent days and weeks. They said if America joined in the campaign to rid the Iranians of the nuclear project, World War III would erupt. And yet here we are, and, touch wood, World War III has not erupted. But that's because they don't believe America can act in a way that improves things. But that is anti-American, fundamentally.
Yeah, that's the horseshoe theory. The convergence
Yes.
of the right and the left is just amazing. You look at Tucker Carlson, and he is articulating the Biden foreign policy in the Middle East, basically appeasing Iran. How did MAGA get there? Luckily, President Trump has not been confused by this.
No.
Douglas,
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this: you can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely. It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.